Perfect. Alrighty. Well, hello to you too. Maybe someone else will be joining us at some point, but I think a lot of people are looking for the recording later. I am Dr. Adrienne Wilen. I am a naturopathic physician at Federal Way Naturopathy down in Federal Way. I have a special interest in gastrointestinal health and cardiometabolic health. So it's kind of why I wanted to do this class on eating to balance your blood sugars. I see patients every day with a range of symptoms caused by blood sugar dysregulation. So that can range from those who just get hangry when they haven't eaten in a while, all the way to metabolic syndrome or diabetes. Blood sugar spikes can happen even if you don't have diabetes, and it can cause a myriad of symptoms that you don't even think of are related to your blood sugars. All right, let me see, let everybody in. Oops. All righty, sorry, just letting another person into the meeting here. So here's a general outline of what we're going to talk about today. This class is all about eating to balance blood sugars and is designed to provide everyday tips and tricks to prevent glucose spikes, which could be damaging to your body overall. Alrighty, so if sugar is so bad, then why do we need it? Our bodies need sugar, specifically glucose, to power every cell in our body. Glucose is the #1 fuel for the brain and is important as a quick energy source throughout the rest of your body as well. Scientific evidence does not support adverse outcomes of sugar intake when it's consumed in moderation and as part of a diet that does not contain excess calories. When we eat, most of the carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, which then goes into our bloodstream. So glucose in the blood can then be transported to the body's cells, providing a quick and efficient energy source. Easy to digest carbs can be life-saving when blood sugars drop too low and quick treatment is needed. So thinking hypoglycemia. Their ability to rapidly provide energy to our cells also makes those quick, easy to digest carbs a preferred source of a mid-workout fuel for athletes. Ingested glucose that isn't needed at that time is then stored in the liver and the muscles. The stored form of glucose is made up of many different connected glucose molecules, and it's called glycogen. Glycogen then acts as the energy reserve that's used when your blood glucose levels drop, such as when you exercise. You also need sugar because it helps metabolize fats and prevents your body from using protein as energy. Excuse me. Blood sugar or blood glucose, kind of using those terms interchangeably today, in particular, gets broken down in a series of chemical reactions that then creates energy and fuels your cells. Insulin is released when you eat sugar and tells your cells to absorb the glucose so then they can use it as energy. The body can also use protein and fat as energy. However, the breakdown then creates keto acids and makes the body acidic, which isn't optimal. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, whole grains, basically any nutrient-dense food contains naturally occurring sugars and starches that can be broken down into glucose or other forms of sugar, such as galactose and fructose. Galactose is commonly found in milk and dairy products. Fructose is naturally found in fruits, honey. Unlike glucose, galactose and fructose need to be broken down in the liver before they can be used for energy. Sucrose is what we think of when we picture just like white table sugar. It's a mix of fructose and glucose, so still needs processed. The average American consumes about 3 pounds of sugar per week, or 3,550 in their entire lifetime. All right, so moving on to how blood glucose is regulated. It's done autonomically, so subconsciously, we don't have to think about it, constantly throughout each minute, each second, all day, every day. Normal blood glucose levels should be between 60 and 140 milligrams per deciliter in order to supply all of the cells in your body with the required energy. Brain cells don't need insulin to drive glucose into the neurons like other cells, they need that signal, but there still needs to be a normal amount available in the blood around them that they can use. So too little glucose is hypoglycemia. We see that here on the right, and that starves your cells. Too much glucose, hyperglycemia here on the left, is the state when there's too much glucose in the bloodstream. This can make your blood thick and syrupy. Think like high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup in general, just that thickness. And it can be really intoxicating to the cells, and it can also compete with oxygen absorption. So hyperglycemia is greater than 300 milligrams per deciliter, causes increased urination, which can result in dehydration. And then if you have profound hyperglycemia, so thinking greater than 500 milligrams per deciliter, so that's pretty high. We see that more in people with diabetes who can't regulate blood glucose. That can lead to confusion, swelling of your brain, coma, and eventually death. On the opposite side, we have hypoglycemia, so that's less than 70 milligrams per deciliter, and can lead to blurry vision, difficulty concentrating, confusion, slurred speech, numbness and tingling, makes you tired. Then if blood glucose stays too low for too long, it starves your brain of glucose. That's your brain's number one fuel. It's all it uses is glucose. And so that can lead to seizures, coma, and rarely, but still possibly death. So you basically get the same outcomes with that hyper and that hypo, coma, death. Mild hypoglycemia is often the cause of hunger. So normally blood glucose levels will fluctuate after you eat. That'll increase after you eat a meal. And then when your blood sugar rises, the pancreas releases insulin, causing the body to absorb the glucose from the bloodstream. So your blood sugars dip back down and go back to baseline. So that's that 60 to 140 that everyone's just kind of trying to maintain as that baseline. For people who don't have diabetes, a meal of carbohydrates replenishes that circulating blood glucose, that baseline, about 10 minutes after eating, and then continues for about 2 hours. Your first phase of insulin is released about 5 minutes after starting to eat, and then the second phase is about 20 minutes. So let's talk about glucose spikes. So this is a really cool image here. There is a biochemist on Instagram, if you have Instagram. She's at Glucose Goddess, but she wears a continuous glucose monitor and will make graphs of different foods like this when she eats. So it's really cool to see the different things and how you can kind of change your blood glucose levels based on what you're eating, how you're eating. So as your body goes between that fed and that unfed state throughout the day, your blood sugar levels, they're going to fluctuate. That's natural. But the blood sugar spike is that really sharp rise and then a sharp fall. They can happen due to a variety of factors, but for the most part, we think, okay, are you eating too many simple carbohydrates at once? So thinking baked goods, anything made with white flour, table sugar, anything with added sugars, fruit juice and soda, candy, or honey. Other things can also impact how much sugar enters and stays in your bloodstream, potentially causing that spike. Thinking how much food was ingested, exercise, stress, illness, medications, dehydration. We also have what's called the dawn phenomenon. So this is a natural surge in blood sugar early in the morning, kind of wake you up. There's also the Somogi effect. So this is a high early morning blood sugar that's caused by a rebound effect from your body having too low of blood sugar in the middle of the night. So if you didn't eat or you ate something that caused a glucose spike and a big fall before bedtime, and then you dip down into a hypoglycemic state at night, your body rebounds back up and thinks, we need to release all this glycogen, and you actually will end up with a high blood sugar in the morning. And so this can actually cause people to wake up feeling anxious because when you get that high blood sugar, your body releases cortisol. So we've got a high cortisol spike in the morning, or nausea, again, just due to that high blood sugar. A 2018 study from Stanford showed that 80% of non-diabetic people experience glucose spikes from common foods like breakfast cereals. So it's not just people who have diabetes, who have metabolic dysfunction, who have PCOS. We're seeing this in anyone. A study analyzing data that was from 2009 to 2016 revealed that 57% of American adults did have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. It's a pretty high number. Alrighty, so long-term impacts of glucose spikes. Why do we want to prevent these? That frequent yo-yoing of your blood sugars and excess glucose in the bloodstream can cause long-term damage to many parts of your body. Sugar stimulates the production of free fatty acids in the liver. When the body digests these free fatty acids, the resulting compounds can trigger that inflammatory process, and we'll get either low-grade inflammation, chronic inflammation. And that's systemic, so that's going to spread over your whole body. Sugar and other inflammatory foods also cause our bad cholesterol, that's our LDL, to rise, which leads to more C-reactive protein, or CRP, which is another protein that can lead to inflammation. So looking at your vasculature, so heart, arteries, veins, one target of the harmful effects of those high blood sugars is your endothelial cells. So that's all the cells that line your blood vessels. Repeat levels of high blood sugar can cause your blood vessels to produce damaging reactive molecules called free radicals. So this is through compounds called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, AGES, which is kind of funny because when you think about it, they actually cause aging. Too much of this free radical activity causes oxidative stress, it damages the endothelial cells, and then you end up with inflammation in your blood vessels that can become chronic. Glucose, because of that change in that LDL, the buildup of the bad cholesterol, can also increase your risk of plaque buildup in your blood vessels. And then let's think about skin and aging, like we just mentioned. So the more glucose spikes in your diet, the higher amounts of inflammation. And inflammation leads to an increase in acne, rosacea, psoriasis. So if any of those underlying conditions are there, that inflammation can make them worse. Glucose spikes also increases that glycation process. So glycation is basically putting a glucose on different compounds because that's where they're storing them. But it can cause those free radicals, and it can contribute to the development of wrinkles through inflammation. And then when protein or fats are combining with those sugars in our blood, which happens when there's excess, it can result in, again, those AGEs, those advanced glycation end products, which leads to inflammation. All right, and then thinking about hormones. So insulin tells your ovaries to produce more testosterone. So if you are having more and more glucose spikes over time, your body is going to make more and more insulin because it's becoming less effective. So that's where we get insulin resistance. So that increases the insulin, can increase testosterone production. This is one of the things that we see in people with PCOS. All right, and then energy levels. So thinking about the higher they are, the harder they fall. So this is applying to your glucose spikes. So because of those quick acting carbohydrates, they're very easy to digest. You get that sudden rush of energy from that high blood sugar. But then that easy accessible glucose is used very quickly because it's so easily accessible. And then you get that big fall. So this happens after the meal or snack or whatever you're doing, and can lead to fatigue within 2 hours of eating because you're having more of a drop than you would if you had a steady blood glucose. So having that smaller, flatter glucose curve is going to lead to a steadier energy level throughout the day. And then the last thing that's not on here is cravings. So the roller coaster caused by these glucose spiking and dropping actually causes junk food cravings, according to a Yale University study. All right, real quick, I just want to touch on artificial sweeteners because this is what they were made for. They were made to make it so you can try things and think they are sweet and tasty, but supposedly not going to impact your blood sugars. So they were originally developed as a healthier alternative, but a study published this year found that artificial sweeteners may affect the gut microbiome in a way that impacts glycemic control. So you're not actually absorbing that artificial sweetener as a source of glucose or sugar, but your microbiome will act differently to absorb and sorry, I can't think of the word. I missed the word. Absorb and break down different things that you're eating the same time that you're drinking this diet cola. So one research has also shown a link between artificial sweeteners and an increase in metabolic dysfunction. And artificial sweetener consumption is positively associated with weight gain. Aspartame specifically has been considered unsafe. I know there's a lot of other ones out there, but this is the one that's the primary sweetener in Coke and Diet Coke and Coke Zero, and has actually been shown to increase the risk of blood cancers and pelvic cancers in rats. I know we're not rats, but just something to think about. There was also an Israeli study suggesting that artificial sweeteners enhance the population of the gut bacteria that are more efficient at pulling energy from our food. So that seems like it'd be a good thing. But those specific bacteria are the ones that pull the energy and then turn it into fat. Promote us turning it into fat. They're not doing that. So in other words, artificial sweeteners may favor the growth of bacteria that make more calories available to us, allowing for more absorption of sugars into the bloodstream and then to be stored as fat. Okay, so let's get to what we were all here to talk about. So we've learned about the good, the bad, and the ugly about sugar, why we need it, why we don't want too much of it. Let's talk about how to actually flatten that glucose curve. So remember, a nice flat curve means less spikes followed by quick drops. So we want to kind of like do a little roller coaster and not this. All right, so tip number 1, start with vegetables. Veggies contain fiber, which coat the small intestine and will slow down gastric emptying, leading to glucose from the rest of your meal being absorbed at a slower rate. There will also be less glucose absorbed just because some of it gets missed in all of this. So you're going to have less of that glucose spike. Tip number 2, savory breakfast, not sweet. I know when we think breakfast, we think cinnamon rolls or pancakes or things like that, but we got to think back to that, like eggs and bacon. Well, not even going to get started on that, but starting your day with protein and healthy fats instead of sugar can lead to smaller glucose spikes. So this means steadier hunger hormones. You're not going to have that glucose crash. So if you eat breakfast and you feel like you need to go take a nap by 11, less likely to happen. You'll also have less insulin release and more available energy throughout the day. So you'll stay full longer and avoid cravings throughout the day. So really breakfast is setting the tone for what you're going to want to eat the rest of the day. All right, tip number 3, move your muscles after meals. So a lot of times people will eat and then they're like, oh, I want to go rest. But in reality, getting moving in will help stabilize your energy the rest of the day. This is because by using your muscles after a meal, the glucose that was just consumed gets used immediately to fuel your muscles instead of creating a spike. So instead of eating sugar and then you're going to spike up, it's you're kind of eating it and using it at the same time, which kind of keeps it more steady. So this doesn't have to be going on a run or doing a ton of exercise afterwards, but love to have people think about doing a 10-minute walk after meals. You can even dance around the kitchen while you're doing your dishes or do some really intense house cleaning, but just getting moving and not just sitting down after meals is really important. All right, next batch of tips and tricks here. Tip number 4, dress up those carbs. So put some clothes on them. So instead of eating your carbohydrates alone, you can think about mixing them with things. So we talked a little bit about how veggies should come first. Next up should be proteins and fats. And then your starches and sugars should always be last. So the fiber in the vegetables, again, coats the small intestine, leads to that slower emptying of your stomach. Fats are also going to slow down that gastric emptying, meaning the carbs that are coming in afterwards, when they're broken down into sugars, when they reach that small intestine, it's going to break down slower because your body's already working on the fats in the vegetables, and then it's going to be absorbed slower as well. So again, if you are one of those people who likes to eat in order, we go veggies first, proteins and fats, Carbs and sugars last. If you want to dress them up though, mix them all together. Think casseroles or like your grains mixed in with things. Instead of eating your chicken and rice separate, mix them together. All right, tip number 5, opt for dessert instead of a sugary snack. So this one is always, when I tell people this, they get a little thrown off because I'm telling them to eat dessert. But in reality, it's better that sugar is eaten at the end of the meal. So if you're gonna eat something sweet, end of the meal, never as a snack on an empty stomach, because then the sugar is just dropping into that empty stomach, absorbed quick, and then you're gonna get that spike. So this goes for fruit as well. Not a huge proponent of fruit as snacks unless you are mixing it, putting some clothes on your carbs. So thinking of adding nuts with your fruit, have some like a little trail mix with your strawberries, things like that. So thinking about having that healthy fat or protein with your sweetness. So whether that's something sugary, baked good, fruit, can help prevent those glucose spikes. And then tip number 6. So this one doesn't work for everyone. It works for everyone. It does not work in people's lives necessarily all the time because drinking a little bit of vinegar can be a little strange, but just a little bit of vinegar before meals or even to your vegetable. So thinking like a vinaigrette on your salad can be really beneficial. So vinegar has been shown to slow down how quickly starches are broken down into glucose during digestion. Vinegar, that acidity tells our cells to burn more fat, and it tells our muscles to absorb more of the glucose from the bloodstream. So just 1 tablespoon of vinegar into a little bit of water about 10 minutes before your meals has been shown to lead to a steadier glucose curve. They do have apple cider vinegar gummies out there. Those do not have the same effect. It's just straight vinegar liquid. Lemon juice is also an option. It's acidic, but studies have shown that you need about 3 lemons worth of juice to have the same impact as that 1 tablespoon of vinegar. All right, so those are my 6 tips and tricks, but I thought I'd throw in a couple bonus ones here since Halloween is coming up. So these are kind of plays on the ones that we've already talked about. So saving your candy for after a meal instead of on an empty stomach. So gonna have candy around the house, probably gonna eat it, just making sure that you're doing it after you already ate something beforehand. So it's not dropping in on an empty stomach. And then mixing candy with nuts to slow glucose. So that's just going to give you that healthy fat, slow down that glucose release, slow down that absorption. And then go trick-or-treating, go with your kids, go with yourself, go with your friends, but movement's gonna help burn that glucose from the bloodstream. And then if you are moving around more frequently, so we've got that glucose burnt off, you'll start burning off the glycogen and then move on to fat burning. So there you go. All right. Gonna go ahead and open it up for questions now. Here's my contact information if anyone is interested in getting more support. Like I said, work at Federal Way Naturopathy. I've got our website and our phone number there. So let me just open this up a little more and see if anyone has said anything. All right. Anyone have any questions?
No, it's a lot of information to take in, though. It's really good